In this episode of Cars from Japan, presented by Cars from Japan, we drive baby Godzilla, the Nissan Pulsar GTi-R. So the Pulsar GTi-R got the name Baby Godzilla quite simply because it's the little brother of the GTR, and it's an all-wheel drive turbocharged car. But instead of being built for Group A racing like the GTR, the Nissan Pulsar GTi-R was designed for WRC, the World Rally Championship. And if you think back to when this came out, you can think of things like the Liberty RS Turbo, the Mitsubishi Galant VR4, and this was Nissan's campaign into WRC. And obviously all-wheel drive, four-cylinder turbocharged was the formula at the time. So let's take a closer look at the car and find out what makes it so special. So in Australia, the version of Pulsar that we got was the Triple S, which had a naturally aspirated SR20, and it was a four-door. Now you'll notice with this, it is based off the two-door Nissan Pulsar. Now the GTi-R gets the different bonnet with the negative pressure ducts to let heat out, and it has the bonnet duct in the middle, which obviously feeds air to the top-mounted intercooler. It has the rear spoiler on the back, it has its own bespoke front bumper, and this one has been fitted with some aftermarket wheels as well. So they do look pretty cool being a two-door, and that's what makes them more unique than the Pulsar we got here in Australia. So the Pulsar GTi-R uses the famous SR20 DET, or God's motor, as many of us like to call it. Now, unlike the S13 Silvia, this is mounted east-west or transverse so that it can have a front-wheel drive style gearbox with a transfer case, and then obviously all-wheel drive by having a shaft down to the back with the diff at the back as well. Now, this engine, although it has a red top, is different to the red top SR20 DT in a few areas. The biggest difference is these are actually solid lifter from factory, have a slightly different camshaft to go with it. They have a larger turbocharger, and one of the very popular differences it has, these actually have quad throttle bodies. So a totally different inlet manifold that has 4 throttle bodies. It has the intercooler on top, and it's larger than the little side mount that the S13 Silvia gets. All up, it's good for 170 kilowatts from factory, but obviously all of these upgrades means it is a little bit easier to get more power out of these with some basic mods compared to the S13 Silvia. So inside, it's a Nissan Pulsar. It's kind of like how the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution is still a Lancer inside. The Pulsar GTi-R is, well, just like all the other WRC cars, is still pretty pedestrian inside. They do have these bucket seats or quasi-bucket seats, which aren't too bad with different trim. I do like the triple gauge cluster with oil temperature, oil pressure, and boost pressure in the center console, but other than that, there's not a lot to give the game away, except for when you look behind you and realize there's no back doors and a little bit less legroom. What is cool about this 94 model though is sunroof. Not a very common thing to see on a Pulsar GTi-R. This thing's done 108,000 Ks, and overall condition inside is actually pretty good for a car that's 30 years old with 108,000 Ks. So certainly not going to win any awards for the most luxurious or sporty interior, but that's not what it's about. This is a hot hatch WRC special. All right, here we go, Nissan Pulsar GTi-R. I don't think I've actually ever driven one the more I think about it, or if I have, I've only driven it very briefly and not properly, because I don't actually remember having ever driven one of these properly. Now this thing's pretty stock. It's got 100,000 Ks, 30 years old, so you expect it to feel 30 years old. Suspension in this thing's actually not too bad, it's still pretty tight. It doesn't feel like it's completely clapped out and destroyed. So this thing still drives pretty good for a 30-year-old car. Gearbox still feels really good, although I've heard these things with a bit of extra power can be not so good. Bit of turbo lag, as you expect for a 90s JDM car, but it's not too bad. One thing I love about this car is it was a hot hatch before the word hot hatch was even really a thing. Early 90s, all-wheel drive turbo 4-cylinder hatchback. Let's see what it's like, shall we? Plenty of mid-range, so you can just stay in third through here. Honestly, through there, how does it feel? I mean, you can tell it's an older 90s JDM thing, but it's got a short wheelbase, so it actually is like, it feels like a go-kart. It actually feels really nimble. nimble and light on its feet through there. It's not as stable at some of that longer flowing corners as say like a later model WRX or Evo or whatever, but that's part of the appeal of this car. It's a little hot hatch, it's a little pocket rocket, and it is pretty fun. It's actually pretty fun. So if the Pulsar GTi-R was designed for the World Rally Championship, let's take it on a bit of road where we've taken a few other cars that were designed for the World Rally Championship. So overall, with the Pulsar GTi-R, it's kind of like, I guess, well, the old Liberty and Mitsubishi Evos and stuff, because it's still based on just a normal passenger car underneath. You don't get like the vibe of something super special inside. They're pretty basic, they're pretty mundane inside. But when you drive them flat out, that's when you get what you're supposed to get out of these cars. They're all-wheel drive turbocharged WRC specials. So when you drive them, that's when it clicks. Now what I love about driving stuff like this, the feel that they have, the feedback, and I guess you can almost even say the vibe that they have when you drive them is so different to modern cars. These, even at driving at 7/10 and half the pace of some modern hot hatches, it's just more fun. They've just got so much feedback. They've got their quirks, they've got their character you've got to get used to and learn to drive around. And they just are a whole lot of fun to drive. If I bought one of these, I'd want to drive it. Not sit in the shed as a collector's item because it's some special car. Just go out and drive it if you get something like this. And yeah, this thing is a lot of fun through that back road, because that's where you'd expect something designed for WRC would be fun, right? Is it the fastest thing out there? No. Is there modern cars that are faster? Definitely. Most hot hatches would beat this over a section of road, but the driver feel and enjoyment you get of driving something so analog from the 90s is just worth it. These really are cool. Are they a baby Godzilla? Look, yes and no. They don't feel anything like a GTR. It's just the all-wheel drive and turbo thing that gave it its name. It doesn't feel anything like a GTR. This thing was designed for rally, not for Group A racing, so it just feels very different. But overall, super cool car.